Today on Podio Commentary, we're exploring InAViolentNature, a 2024 Canadian slasher film that turns the genre on its head with its ambient nature documentary style. Directed by Chris Nash, this film follows a resurrected mute killer in the remote wilderness of Ontario, blending art house aesthetics with visceral horror. We'll uncover the inspiration behind Nash's vision, the challenges faced during production, and the critical reception that's sparking conversations everywhere. All of that and more here today on Podio Commentary. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Podio Commentary. My name is Matt Jarbo. This is an episode that I've been kind of dying to talk about, no pun intended. InAViolentNature is a movie that caught my interest as soon as I heard about it. A horror movie from the perspective of the killer. What exactly was this going to be? Was this going to be something where we're following, like a Ted Bundy-esque type movie or a Jeffrey Dahmer type movie? Or is it going to be something like that? Because when it was first pitched as a serial killer, I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, we could take a look at some of these other killers that are out there. There's obviously a lot to pull from. There's a lot of information out there to pull from. Turns out that's actually not like really the case, because it's not really a serial killer, although he does kill multiple people in extremely violent ways. I guess that's where the term InAViolentNature comes from, because these deaths are vicious. But it's more of a slasher perspective, obviously, right? It's more of a akin to Jason. Is if I was going to, associate this killer with literally any other type of horror movie out there, it's definitely going to be something like Jason, Friday the 13th. Not Freddy, not Mike. Oh, you could maybe say Michael Myers a little bit. Maybe there's probably a bit of an overlap. But due to the nature of the movie taking place in the Canadian wilderness and Jason and Camp Crystal Lake, I feel like that's more in line with what they're trying to go for with this movie. But you could see a little bit of Michael Myers. However, just because of I would argue probably more about Jason than I would say Michael Myers, but there's a familial aspect to it. It's really interesting. It's like, it's supernatural. It is like, I'm just going to kind of run with that in the beginning. It's supernatural, but not in a way that makes it feel like, out of the realm of, you can suspend disbelief is basically what I'm trying to say. It's kind of a hard one to talk about because the movie itself is so different. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I think it's as divisive as it is. I only saw this recently on PVOD. So I didn't get the chance to go see this in theaters, but a lot of people, when they were talking about the movie, there was a lot of commentary I heard about being boring, about it being just like paced terribly, that the kills were cool, albeit somewhat unnecessary in some of the ways that they shot it. And it was just like some people said it was boring. Other people said that it was amazing. It really got a lot of conversation kind of flowing around the movie itself, which only made me more excited to watch this film. And I have to say, I didn't think it was boring at all. I thought it was paced just fine. It is an interesting movie to watch. It's one that I quite enjoyed, would gladly watch again, but I wouldn't watch it again by myself. I think I want to start off by saying that. I wouldn't watch it again by myself. It's one that I'd want to show people to get their reaction to, because the kills are are that visceral, but I just want to show it to other filmmaker friends of mine and just to see what they pulled from it, because I know a lot of people are going to focus on the violence. They're going to focus on the gore, the craziness of it all. But the thing that got me is that it absolutely was a movie that was very simplistic in its design. And that's one of the things that worked well for it. All the different, if this entire movie had sound design. I don't think there's any on location sounds, if you want my honest opinion. I think everything in the movie was ADR. Maybe there's some on location stuff with some of the kids at the ranger station and definitely the campfire scene. But I mean, for the most part, everything in the movie is sound designed. Everything in the movie is ADR'd, and it's done in a way that really kind of makes it feel kind of like a nature documentary. It's very focused in its sound, the viewer in. Okay. It's meant to draw the viewer in because we all know what it's like to go stand in the middle of maybe most of us. I don't know if everyone does, but a lot of us know what it's like to go stand in the middle of a forest and just listen to the sounds, and how intriguing, engaging, and even like isolating that is. You know what I mean? It's so interesting how they did this movie with the sound design that I feel like it's not getting enough of the conversation, because it's really good sound design, albeit it's simplistic sound design. And that's kind of the point. That's the whole damn point. And I thought that was brilliant because we're so used to all these big explosions and crashes and everything else. But no, it's very much this perspective of just of a mute killer not saying anything and like just going into the forest in order to retrieve an item, which we're going to get to that. So the movie was written and directed by Chris Nash, who is a Canadian filmmaker known for his expertise in special effects and prosthetics, which were definitely on full display here with InAViolentNature. So he came up with this idea for the movie while he was working on a little film called Psycho Goreman, which is one I only recently learned about, and I saw the trailer for, and it looks like ridiculously entertaining, so I need to go give it a watch. And it was here while he was working on the movie during a casual conversation about the stagnation in slasher films. He pitched this concept that would combine the slow, methodical pacing of Gus Van Sant's movies with the visceral intensity of a slasher. And he was like, in Gus Van Sant, I can't say that I'm like super familiar with a lot of his work. The last one I think I really remember seeing was his remake of Psycho, which for being a shot-for-shot remake was actually pretty decent for the late 90s. I mean, albeit like nowhere near as good as the Hitchcock movie. But it's still like, going for those kind of shots. I get it, right? But in this particular case, Nash was drawing inspiration from more Van Sant's like minimalistic filmmaking styles. These are like some of the things that were seen in like Jerry, Elephant, and Last Days, according to an interview with Chris Nash. And these are movies I haven't seen, so you take his word for it. But he did envision a film that treated the movements of a killer through the wilderness as if it were a nature documentary. And like I said before, it really that boils down to the sound design. Go and watch like Planet Earth, right? Or any of those nature documentaries when they're showcasing like a predator in the wild, or they're showcasing prey, and you'll hear the ambient noise. You'll hear the ambient noise. They make it seem like there's a calm, serene environment. And then like they'll cut to the predator and like the music will swell up, and then we kind of wait for the predator to strike. They build that intensity by establishing calmness and then going in and showing us the kill. It's again, this isn't like a David Attenborough documentary, but you could definitely see what they were going for. And to me, that only makes the experience better because I just really enjoyed that they tried something different. And I think for me, it really worked. Now, when they came to shooting this movie, they had a bit of problems. So when they finally got around to filming it, they filmed it in a place called Kawartha Lakes, which is an area of central Ontario. However, as they were filming this, Chris Nash realized that, this isn't really like capturing like the eerie and isolated atmosphere that he desired. So they ended up like leaving there, scrapping the vast majority of the movie that they'd already shot. And then they moved it to a place called Algoma District near Sault Ste. Marie, which is a region that provided a more dense and like remote wilderness setting, which definitely added to the ambiance that they were trying to go for. If you watch the movie, it does feel like they are middle of nowhere. It's not like a Camp Crystal Lake. It's just like a forest. And in this forest is kind of where this evil lurks, but nobody, but like only some people really know about it. One of the things I meant to mention about this in my initial thoughts is this movie comes across like it is the third film in a trilogy. Okay. Like it really does play like either it's like the second film in a trilogy or it's the third film in the trilogy. And I would argue it's more towards like the third film in a trilogy that spans approximately like 50 years, 40, 50 years based upon the lore that the movie espouses. And that's another factor of this as well. There's lore building in this movie, but it's done kind of sporadically. And it's done in a way that doesn't, you really have to kind of like use your imagination in many ways based upon the information that you are given. Okay, so it's like when they tell the story of the killer and they tell the story of the town and they tell the story of the murders and how long ago it was and how they've already put him in the ground once before. You are meant to believe that this is a movie like where like we're kind of getting callbacks to other instances where this guy has been a killer and going around and killing people, which really makes me wonder if they were establishing this in a way of going backwards, right? Of giving us this movie and then giving us a prequel and then giving us the first film, and kind of having a trilogy done in reverse, which would make a lot of sense and be very interesting. This kind of filming style for everything else might get a little bit difficult. Like, think for a second, like Blair Witch Project in 1999, which is now 25 years old, and go figure, we're all old on that one. But then immediately go to like Blair Witch, The Book of Shadows, which is instead of being like a point of view found footage, it's a narrative based feature. And it pleased really no one. Like, if you remove the Blair Witch, it's like not terrible, but as far as sequels go, it's pretty bad. But, but this kind of movie in this particular filming style, I don't know if that would work if they went backwards. Like, it's really good where it's at. But if they were to attempt to keep the same style while going backwards, it would be fascinating. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself on that one. But I just feel like the lore is something like worth talking about, because it does establish that there's been multiple instances with fighting this bad guy. Very similar to Jason, Michael, Freddy, Chucky, Hellraiser, all the people, right? Pinhead's the name I want to use. And now even Art the Clown in Terrifier 3 that's coming out here in a few months. So there's just like so much that this movie has been able to, to kind of like pull upon, but it does it in such a simplistic way that it's just cool. I just really enjoyed that it was like the lore dumps were done at the right time, and it was done in a way for you to kind of keep going with it, but you still wanted to see the violence. Anyway, I know, getting back to where they filmed this movie. So when they changed it to the Algoma district, this was literally like the first part of like many challenges that they had faced. There was like weather conditions that had been a problem. Logistical issues led to delays and complications. And they ultimately ended up reshooting approximately 75 to 80% of the film. I mean, that's one estimate I've seen. I've seen other estimates say like 70%. But either way, like they're refilming like 2/3, 3/4 of this movie. And I guess one of the significant hurdles was the ambitious underwater scene, that they had to reimagine it multiple times due to technical and financial constraints, according to this report that I'm reading. I mean, like when you see that scene in the movie, when you see the underwater scene, again, when I talk about everything being ADR'd, right? Like, you have the two girls across the lake. Obviously, they are expressing their desire to bump pelvises, and everything else. And the one girl's like, I'm going to go for a swim. And then you see the killer just like walk in the lake, all freaking, like, what I imagined was, remember the episode of Simpsons when it's a Chowder episode and Bart is playing hooky that day and Skinner is on his trail and they're running across the woods, and Bart cuts the rope bridge and then Skinner just walks through the creek or the river and then comes out on the other side like Jason. I mean, they even had like the kill, die. They even had that in the episode. That's what I imagined when I watched the scene, because the girls are swimming on the other side. The one girl is swimming on the other side of the lake, and then the killer just walks into the water. And again, it's all silent because it's all ADR. It's all sound design. It's all just meant to really focus on the sounds you're meant to hear rather than all of the ambiance, which is just so good. I freaking love that. And then it's just like, we see her swimming and then she gets pulled under the water. She tries to come back up, kind of like Jaws. Like, it was a little bit like Jaws, how they shot it. Like, but again, the camera is from the other side of the lake, right? So we get this really long shot of her dying, and it's not really terrifying, but it's really interesting the way that they did it. And I can understand that they're having a lot of complications with trying to get the scene, and they wanted to maybe shoot underwater because it's meant to be from his perspective. I can see how that would be something like wildly crazy, like, I mean, just technologically, like technically speaking, is just too much for the budget that they had. I mean, this movie's estimated to have like a $5 million budget from what I found. This thing I think could have been made for like $20 in a Jawbreaker. There's some visual, like it's mostly practical. There's some visual stuff that would have added to it, but I feel like $5 million seems like a bit much, to be fair. But then again, Paranormal Activity 2 also cost $5 million. So, is it 5 million Canadian, which would have been like $20 American? I'm not too sure. But anyway, the way they did that scene in the lake, I thought was really good, because it's like she dies. She actually dies like the simplest of anybody else in the movie. She dies like the simplest, because all she does is get pulled underwater, and then she tries to get up and she gets pulled back under again. And then I don't know if he stabs her. I don't know, whatever. We don't see it. But all we know is that she gets held underwater for a while and then comes back up and just floats to the top. And then she's floating. And then it cuts to the other side of the lake and she's floating next to the dock. And then the killer just climbs out of the water, right? And then just starts walking to kill the other girl in the yoga scene. And that's like the most like crazy scene in the movie is that dang freaking yoga scene. I mean, like, that yoga scene is something I saw an image of it like on Twitter before I saw the movie, and it was just a picture of the girl doing yoga, and it was all like InAViolentNature, the yoga scene. If you know, you know. So I was really waiting for that scene when I'm watching the movie because I just kept hearing how crazy it was. And the fact, like, what bugged me about that scene was, like, for one, I think where they shot it was great. I think the whole setup for it was great. She's on the edge of a cliff. She can't really go anywhere. And the girl kind of like just like resigns to her fate. I don't know if that was on purpose because she's like, she didn't make an attempt to like go down the hill, right? She just kind of like turned around and like waited for him to come up behind her and like put his hand through the small of her back and then out through her stomach. And then of course the whole thing of putting the hook in her head and pulling her head through her stomach, crumpling her body. It was cool. I'll fully admit it was cool. I think part of my issue with that was just like, it was kind of so over the top for what it needed to be. Right. But I get it. I totally get it. But my favorite shot in all of that was then it cuts to the wide shot of the cliff and he just kicks her body off of the cliffside and just rolls into the lake, you know, and it's just this long shot and you're just like watching this body fall. And at one point, like the body gets kind of stuck on something, but some other stuff ends up rolling down and that falls into the lake, giving you the splash effect. And I just thought that was interesting where it's like, yeah, her body didn't even go all the way down. So eventually someone's going to find it. And I just thought that was like really, really good. I just really enjoyed the cinematography of this. I think like that played a real crucial role in my enjoyment of the movie because it was just so simple in so many ways, but it was just captivating to watch like this. You know, it's almost like, okay, like some people complaining about it. I get that. But like we play video games. A lot of us play video games and a lot of us play third person video games. So we spend a lot of our time playing games where we are watching it from over the shoulder in a third person perspective. So in this case, it's almost like you're watching that. Like it's almost like you're watching like a let's play of a video game, but not. It's just, you know, so I think on that particular front, it makes some sense. You know, like I really enjoyed like everything. Like this movie has like a lot of static long takes. There's like no musical score. It just relies on like very simple sound design, but it's enough to captivate you and to draw you in. The violence is pretty gory. Like the first kill I loved because there's like, again, like there's like the first kill was with the guy in the house and everything else. And I thought that was kind of interesting as well. Because then like he cut that guy's like he beat that dude to death, I think with like his own leg or something. But what got me going with the movie was essentially the story, the simplicity of the story. I like how it opened and how it opened with just a couple dudes talking. And then like, you know, they find the locket and they take the locket. And then that's what awakens the bad guy, awakens the killer. And so from there, he's literally just on a mission to find the locket. Like that's his motivation. And he'll kill everyone and anyone until he gets what he wants. And that's the funniest thing. If you just would have given him the locket, no one would have died. If you just would have given him whatever, nobody, you know, it would have been that way. But of course, you know, the movie, like that's not a movie. You have to have people like not understanding how this happened. And of course, people thinking they can stop the killer and then people thinking that they're going to be able to like get away. If I had to really point out a negative on the movie, I think it's really like the humans because, you know, they're there. They have names. I can't really recall many of them. Like I'm literally having to look at the Wikipedia page trying to like remember their character names. I remember the characters, but there's not enough about the characters to make me really identify with them in such a way that I remember their names. And I think that's okay. Largely because like they're cannon fodder. These are characters that you know are going to die. So there's really not much of a need to like get to know them. And in many ways you don't because the perspective is done from the killer and not from the group. And so you get your general archetypes, right? You have your final girl and that is Chris. And Chris is camping with her boyfriend, Troy. And Troy is a dick. And I think Troy's the one who took the locket. And so obviously he's the one you kind of want to see die because he's the jerk. But then there's Colt. And Colt is the friend of Chris's, who is kind of a downer, at least according to Troy. Then you've also got Aaron, who's like the stoner, but he's like the guy who has like the knowledge of the woods that they're in, like the lore dump, you know. And then you've got like Brody and Aurora, and those are like the two girls that are there that are gonna, you know, that they like each other and they want to bump uglies and shit, right? And so it's kind of just like that's the dynamic, you know. And, oh no, then there's Evan, and again, he's just another guy who's there. And so we don't really get a lot of time with them. The only real time we get to see anything involving their dynamic is, you know, a couple scenes, like when they first kill Aaron, you know, like he's arguing, or he's getting a lot of shit, I should say, from some of the other people at the cabin because they'd met these like local girls at a gas station. And they were like, oh, he's going to go and like get with them and whatever. And like, he's basically, they were kind of like implying that he was a virgin or that he just doesn't ever get sex at all. And he's just completely like abstinent, I guess. And, or maybe he had a weird dick. I forget exactly all that they said, but they were just kind of making fun of him. And he goes off to like, you know, smoke in the woods. And then he's listening to his tape player, which I thought was interesting because when he gets killed and he gets like the saw through his mouth and like Johnny basically cuts his head in half and then drags the body back to the ranger station, you hear the tape player, right? You hear the tape player, you hear the music, and it gives you a good idea for how far away the ranger station is from the campsite because the batteries start to die on the tape player. Also, by the way, I don't know if this is set in like modern, I don't think it is. I don't think it's set outside of the 90s. I think that's kind of where it's set. But you just hear like the sound die, you hear the music start to drain out. And then of course I do love the ranger station scene where he like throws the head through the window of the door and then it crashes through and then the head just lands right on like right side up inside the light. Like that was a good shot. And then of course like breaks in and then needs to go and get his axe. And so he just takes the body and throws that into the display to get the weapon. I thought that was great. I thought that was really awesome in regards to like the practicality of showcasing the, you know, what Johnny will do to get what he wants. But what I really loved in regards to like the cinematography was later on when Johnny's making his way back to the cabin and we overhear a fight between Troy, Colt, and Chris, and they want to go get help. And, you know, Troy's like, man, we're not leaving. And he takes the truck keys and he throws the truck keys. And those land and Johnny finds them. And there's a little toy car because we had learned that, you know, he was a kid who was like, you know, lured, kind of a special needs kid who was lured away from this old mining town. And he was basically killed or so we thought. And so like, you know, he's blind, he's mute, like his eyes are all like, you know, milky white, whatever, but he's just playing with this toy. And then he like kind of goes back to being a child and then like ends up hearing the other people. So then he crushes the toy and he goes back out to like basically kill Troy. But what was great about this is he's walking where the camera's tracking him. He's walking and he walks past the house. And as he's walking past one of the windows, we see Evan in the house and he's looking at him through the window like, what the fuck? You know, and he's doing that. And then as Johnny goes to take out Troy, Evan then comes up, you know, with a shotgun, like, and was able to then come out of nowhere and get a shot off. And it shows you that the timing makes sense, right? Evan would have seen Johnny walking towards Troy. Troy and Johnny get into the fight. Evan runs, gets a shotgun, and was able to get one shot off, thinking that they were going to be able to kill him. And then, of course, they're trying to get away, and Johnny gets up and just like freaking boomerangs, essentially. He just one-shots Troy or Evan in the back of the head with an axe from like a solid 50 feet. Like it was just perfect aim. So down goes Evan, right? Troy's injured on his back, crawling away. And then here comes Johnny and just grabs a big rock and just crushes his head like a watermelon. And it was like, oh, dang. That part was great. But then we get back over to the ranger station and, you know, now you've got like the cop, right? The ranger, who has, again, this is where the lore dump kicks in. Learning, oh, we've already done this before. We've put him back into the ground before, we can do it again. And that part was great because what led up with that was the ranger just gets killed. And like this really, like, this is probably what's going to bother most people, but this scene was awesome. Where the body, like the Ranger, he gets like his back broken. Like he becomes basically paralyzed by Johnny, but he's still alive. He just can't talk. He can't do anything, but he's still alive. And then Johnny drags him into like the woodshed where they've got a machine that splits wood, and like it cuts off his arm first, and you don't hear anything out of the Ranger. He's just, his eyes are there, like you can see like whatever, but he's like, he can't say anything, can't do anything. And then Johnny drags his body and puts it there, and then we watch him just get decapitated. And this is where there is some CG. You can see it like on his face when the head comes off, but it's still just like, holy shit. Like, oh my God, like, holy crap. And then like you get down to the final two, and now they're the ones that are like, okay, we need to like fight back. So they're like, we're gonna burn him out. We're gonna burn him. We're gonna lure him to a Ranger or to the fire tower, and we're just gonna set it on fire. And then like Colt tries to distract Johnny to let Chris get away, and then like Johnny just straight kills Colt, like just straight butchers him in the head with an axe, and then that's it. And then but he just continues to like just eviscerate the body. You know what I mean? Just eviscerate the body. And then the whole time Chris is watching him, and she's got like the gas canister, and she's just watching him do this. So she just sets the gas canister down, and she leaves the locket on the gas canister, and then she just takes off into the night. And then she finally in the morning ends up on an access road where a woman is able to like pick her up. And then there's this whole like long conversation between the two. Like really it's the woman, like again, kind of just talking about where they are and whatever, what's going on. And then she's, Chris keeps kind of passing out, and the woman keeps trying to get her to like, stay awake, stay awake, stay awake. And at one point they pull over, and she's trying to like open the door, and they're right next to the woods. So like they're setting it up to where you think Johnny's going to come out of the woods and like kill the woman and then kill Chris, but that doesn't happen. And then it just cuts back to the gas canister and the missing locket, or the locket's now missing. And that's totally indicating that Johnny got what he wanted, and he's going to go back to sleep. And like, that's where the movie ends. And you're like, okay, like I get that. Like, that's kind of cool. You know what I mean? Like, I thought that was pretty good. I enjoyed like how it was a bit subversive and everything else. It was definitely slower cinema, but it was fine. It was good. It was a fun watch. I found myself engaged with it, and I'm not the only one. A critical review of it gave it an 81% on Rotten Tomatoes based on 143 critics. I mean, generally the movie did pretty well with critics. It did okay in the North American box office. It went on to gross about 2.1 million, making it the second best opening for IFC Films after Late Night with the Devil, another movie that I really enjoyed. By June 21st, 2024, InAViolentNature had grossed 4.1 million at the box office. So based on, I don't know, a $5 million budget and probably a lot of tax incentives for filming in Canada, they probably pulled off a pretty decent penny on that one, especially when it hits home video, and a lot of the horror aficionados decide to start scooping it up. One of the things I really hope about this is that it does pick up like a cult following, because it's not as like violent or visceral as, let's say, Terrifier. I mean, it is definitely violent, but it's not like Art the Clown, where it's not like so done, it's so over the top that you kind of like tune out, and it wasn't as long as Terrifier 2, where it was just so over the top long that you're like, all right, can we speed up, please? It had a good pacing, albeit slower, but it really kind of drew you in because you never really knew what was going to happen next. Even though you knew, I mean, you could basically figure out the beat points, all because horror is pretty simplistic, but it was just engaging for what it was. And I really appreciate what Chris Nash did for this. And so I'm looking forward to seeing whatever comes next. I'm looking forward to seeing whatever is going to be built up from this in the future. And yeah, I really enjoyed InAViolentNature, and I want to hear what you guys had to think about this. So find me on Twitter. You guys can find me at mjarbo, MJARBO. And I look forward to hearing from you guys there. And yeah, if you guys are listening to this on YouTube, please leave your thoughts. Like the video, share it around if you enjoy my commentary. And if you're listening to this on podcast form, please leave a review on iTunes or Spotify and help more people, hear about Podio Commentary. Anyway, my name is Matt Jarbo. Have yourself a great day, guys. Thank you so much, and peace out.